What's up, everybody? This is Dante Fortson here with Nephilim Giants Part 1, The Days of Noah. And for those of you who knew or know that I was getting over my cold, I'm a bit dehydrated right now from my nose running, spitting, coughing, stuff like that. So from time to time, I will take a small fraction of a second to take a sip of water. But today we're going to talk about Nephilim Giants in context of the Days of Noah. The Days of Noah becomes important because it's a huge portion of Bible prophecy related to the end times. I know a lot of us who identify as Israelites, we focus on the 400 years, we focus on the awakening, and we focus on everything surrounding that. And yet we often miss a major portion of prophecy if we do not talk about the days of Noah, the Nephilim, the fallen angels, and everything that was going on in those days. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get to it, if you would like a free PDF book, go to blackhistoryinthebible.com. You can get Pre-Slavery Christianity. It was never the white man's religion. Again, blackhistoryinthebible.com. You have to enter your email address. Check your email. That's the important part. Click the confirmation link and then click the download link because it is a PDF, not a paperback. And enjoy. If you do want the paperback, it is available on Amazon.com as well as in Kindle format. But if you want the free PDF, you can go to blackhistoryinthebible.com and follow these instructions. Now, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the subscribe button. Make sure you thumbs up this video. Make sure you click the notification bell and then turn on all notifications so you don't miss any future videos, especially the parts to this series. If you want to support, you can go to patreon.com/Dante Fortson. If you want to support via Cash App, it is hashtag BHITB. PayPal, the link is in the description, and you can support via Super Chat. If you do not have it to support financially, a share and a prayer are always welcome. And of course, click the thumbs up button. That's always appreciated too if you cannot support financially. So today's study is going to be brought to you by my second book, As the Days of Noah Were, The Sons of God and the Coming Apocalypse, and my third book, Beyond Flesh and Blood, The Ultimate Guide to Angels and Demons. These kind of work together, kind of like Undeniable and The Black Hebrew Awakening. These two work together. As the Days of Noah Were covers the days of Noah, the Nephilim, and a little bit about the Sons of God. The book Beyond Flesh and Blood, Ultimate Guide to Angels and Demons is exactly what it says. It breaks down angels and demons in depth. So get those books. Both of those are available on Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. Both are available in paperback and Kindle format. And I'm gonna bring you some of the content today from these books. So quick introduction. Why is this important? I know some of you are thinking probably, why is it important that we even know about the days of Noah that happened back then and it has no relevance now? It's a cool Bible story, but we need to focus on what's going on now. And this is why this is relevant right now. So if you're studying the books of Exodus through 2nd Chronicles, this is going to provide context for some of the events that happen in the books of Exodus all the way through 2nd Chronicles. It provides context for what we call mythology. It provides context for modern day beliefs. So some of the stuff you see going on today, if you have not studied this before, it won't make sense. It seems like it comes out of nowhere, but when you understand what was going on in the days of Noah, it puts everything into context, and you can look at some of the stuff today and say, oh yeah, that's where that come from. So those of you who are familiar with Chuck Missler, you've probably been through some of this study, and some of it's going to be familiar and a lot of it's going to be new because I took mine a little bit further than he went with it. So it provides a blueprint for several end times prophecies. And finally, it provides a reference point for future supernatural Bible studies. So I had to do this one because once we get into angelology and demonology, I'm going to end up pointing back to some of the occurrences from this study to make sense of future studies. Some of you guys know how I do. I like to lay the foundation first and then build upon the foundation, kind of like I did with the Addressing the Evidence series. If you have not watched that series, go watch that series. All right, so there are two theories when it comes to the days of Noah. The first one is the Sethite theory, which I've gone over in a separate video. The link is in the description, or you can really just find it on my page. The Lines of Seth, A Brief History of Heresy. You can go watch that video. It's about 30 minutes long, and it breaks down what the Sethite theory is all about and how it twists scripture. We're going to touch on it a little bit today, but nowhere near as in depth as that video. If you want to read it in paperback, the notes are available in paperback and on Kindle at Amazon.com. If you want the notes to that, The Lines of Seth, A Brief History of Heresy. If you buy, let's see, was it As the Days of Noah Were, The Sons of God and the Coming Apocalypse, the notes from the Sethite, The Lines of Seth, A Brief History of Heresy, the notes from that are in the Days of Noah book. So you don't have to buy both. So if you already have As the Days of Noah Were, I believe it's chapter 3, has all of these notes in it. If you don't have it and you just want the notes, you can buy those separately. All right, so let's talk about As the Days of Noah Were. Today, the view I'm going to be presenting is the older view. It is not the Sethite view. It is not accepted by a lot of people, especially in the traditional Christian church. Very few Israelites I've heard have touched on this. I know Teo Ministries has touched on this in their Ancient World series, which is very, very good. I recommend going to watch that series if you are interested in a lot of supernatural stuff. Recently, I saw that Pastor Omar touched on this subject. I did not agree with some of the stuff he said. I believe he should have done a lot more research before he even presented that. And I'll talk about it when I get to those parts. I do tend to like a majority of Pastor Omar's stuff, but every now and then, to me, I feel like he jumps the gun on his research and presents it without thoroughly vetting it or following through on some of the newer stuff that he's coming into. And I get that he's trying to educate people, but I think he needs to be a little more careful when presenting certain ideologies. And I'll talk about that when we get there. And again, this isn't a bash Pastor Omar session. It's more of a just be aware that there's stuff out there that we shouldn't latch onto just because we found it, and we should do a little bit more digging before we present it. So let's start with Matthew 24. The reason I even wrote the book or thought that this study was worthwhile is because I wanted to understand Bible prophecy. And one of the biggest places to go to understand Bible prophecy when you're still in Eurocentric Christianity is to the New Testament. And specifically the Olivet Discourse, when they go and ask Christ, what are the signs of the end of the age? And he gives you the list of signs. And I've pointed out before that you shall be led captive into all nations when I did the Addressing the Evidence series. And so that was one of the signs. But there's a big sign. I'm not going to say it's bigger, but there's a huge sign that he points to. And this is found in Matthew chapter 24, verses 36 to 39. And I'll start reading there. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, see, this is where many people stop reading, Christians and Israelites alike. They say, okay, well, everything is going to be bad. Everything is going to go on as usual. They're going to eat. They're going to drink. They're going to marry. They're going to be given in marriage. Now, on the surface, that sounds right. However, a good student of the Bible will go back and say, you know what? Let me read the days of Noah and see what was unique about marrying and giving in marriage. Why is that something that stands out? Because people marry and give in marriage all the time. They have throughout all of history. How can that be a sign that we're going to eat, drink, marry, and give in marriage? That's the same thing that's going on. That's not really a sign. So he's giving them this as a sign. Remember that. He's giving them this as a sign. So the subject is they. Who is the they? Well, there's only 3 nouns mentioned here. We have the days of Noah, but that's not going to be what we're referring to. But that's the time period. The nouns are found in verse 36: man, angels, and the Father. But we get a clue to who he is and is not talking about. It says they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So we know the Father did not get taken away in the flood. So therefore, the they does not refer to him. He wasn't getting married during the days of Noah. But if we turn to the days of Noah, we find that there's a belief that both mankind and angels were getting married in the days of Noah. So that adds a different kind of a unique aspect to it. See, now we have something that's out of the ordinary that can be construed or taken as a sign. So let's dig into that. So if we go back to the story of Noah and start to read in depth on what's going on in the story of Noah, you will find that most Christians and Israelites who came out of Eurocentric Christianity believed that Noah's flood was all about bad people. The world got so bad that God sent a flood, wiped it out, and started over. But there's a much deeper issue here. And I know some of you are going to say, yeah, the Nephilim were on the earth. It's even deeper than that. And we're going to go beyond the Nephilim today. So if you're familiar with the Nephilim, get ready to add a bunch more to your paradigm that you probably may not have encountered before. So we're going to start reading Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 6. And it came to pass when men began to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, but for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. All right. So one of the things that we're going to encounter in most basic teachings on this is they use this to say, well, there's giants, but the giants were born from humans, as covered in the Sethite theory. They're going to say the sons of Seth got with the daughters of Cain, and they produced these giants, and they weren't supposed to mix, and God had told them not to mix, and the world became evil, and so God destroyed the world. There's more to it, so we're going to keep going. So the sons of God, we're going to Genesis 6:4. Show you where I'm coming from right here. We're going to break down this verse right here. Genesis 6:4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. There are some people that try to separate the giants from the children that were born to the sons of God and daughters of men. They're saying, well, it's just saying there were giants in the earth in those days, but it's not. They say it's not connected to the sons of God and daughters of men, and that's not true. We're going to see why. So, first of all, the giants are the Nephilim. There were Nephilim in the earth in those days. Nephilim, we'll come back to them. The sons of Yahweh are Elohim, the Benai Ha Elohim, the sons of God. Benai Ha Elohim, sons of God. You'll see it translated as sons of the gods in some places, but it's the sons of God. So the B'nai Elohim, the Benai Ha Elohim, we're looking for a specific phrase here. B-E-N-E Elohim, E-L-O-H-I-M. Now, it does not work if you try to apply this terminology to other places in Scripture. This is a very specific terminology used, and I'm going to show you why it's important to understand the specific terminology, because you'll run into people who are so adamant that this did not happen that they'll try to use other scriptures to say, see, these aren't angels here, and it's used, and that's not the case. It's only found 6 times in Scripture. It's found twice in Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 4. It's found once in Job 1:6, once in Job 2:1, once in Job 38:7, and once in Daniel 3:25. It is in the singular Aramaic. And Nebuchadnezzar refers to the man in the fire as an angel. So we're gonna look at those examples, all of them except for one, because Job 1:6 and Job 2:1 are basically the same exact verse in wording. So we only need to really look at one of those. So starting in the book of Job. Now there was a day, this is Job 1:6 and 7. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. So now Satan is among these sons of God who come to present themselves before the Lord. Understand that even with the temple and the tabernacle, they were never referred to as the sons of God coming to present themselves before the Lord, and the high priest was the only one allowed to go into the Holy of Holies. So here we see a different class of beings, the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim, or the B'nai Ha Elohim, coming, and Satan is among them. Now, he's not necessarily one of them, even though they're all angels. When we get into angelology, we'll talk about how Satan is referred to as a cherub, a different rank of angel than the sons of God. And same thing in Job 2:1. So now we're giving a time frame in Job 38:7 We'll start at verse 6. But in Job 38:7, this is the Most High telling Job, or asking Job questions about the creation. Like, where were you when I was doing all this creation of the earth? And in we'll start at verse 38, verse 6. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened, or who laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, notice it's a question. Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Question mark. Or who laid the cornerstone thereof, semicolon, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So this is indicating that the cornerstone was being laid as the morning stars were singing and the sons of God were shouting for joy. This is talking about the creation of the earth. Humans were not around yet. And again, it used the phrase Benai Elohim or Benai Ha Elohim. So it's not talking about human beings when that phrase is used. So far we've seen Satan come among them twice, and now we've seen that they were present at the creation of the earth. In the book of Daniel, this is where the 3 Hebrew boys get tossed into the fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar sees a fourth. We're going to read Daniel chapter 3, verses 24 through 25. We're going to tie all this together. If it seems like I'm moving kind of fast through it, I'm going to slow it down and bring it back. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto the counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose walking in the midst of the fire, they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Now, depending on what version you're reading, it may say the form of the fourth is like a son of God. But again, it uses the singular. And then later on, if you continue reading Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar says the Lord sent his angel. Nebuchadnezzar calls him outright an angel. So what we are dealing with in Genesis 6, 1 through 4 are angels that see women, human women, and they take them to wife and they have sex with them and they produce hybrid giants known as the Nephilim. So we're going to get into that and understand why the word giant even appears in our Bible instead of the word Nephilim. And the entire translation process continues to prove that these were not the sons of Seth, even though some people want to hold on to that idea. Now, in defense of this idea, some people will say, well, angels are called Malach in the Old Testament, and therefore the Benai Ha Elohim could not have been angels because angels are called Malach. Now, these people are both wrong and right simultaneously. They are right that angels are called Malach, but they are wrong about the Benai Elohim, and I'm going to show you why. Now, in Genesis chapter 16, we have Hagar, who is just fled from Sarai, because she's pregnant, and she looked down on Sarai because she was pregnant, and Sarai couldn't have kids. And so Sarai dealt harshly with her, and they sent her away. And so you're going to have the appearance of the angel of the Lord, or Malach Yahweh. So we'll start at Genesis 16:6 and read through 7. But Abram said unto Sarai, Behold, thy maid is in thy hand, do to her as it pleaseth thee. And when Sarai dealt hardly with her, she fled from her face. And the angel of the Lord found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain in the way to Shur. So the angel of the Lord. Here we go over here. Malach, angel, Yahweh, angel of the Lord. Just so we're clear, Malach, Yahweh. So they'll point to this and say, well, angels are called Malach in the Old Testament. And so therefore that the Benai Elohim could not have been an angel. And so while we're here at Malach, I do want to touch on this because I do find this to be, I'll just call it what it is. It's annoying when people say, well, angel just means messenger. That is probably one of the laziest forms of scholarship ever, is to say, well, angel just means messenger. An angel is a messenger. And as we can see here, yes, it means messenger. However, a messenger is a job or an office. It does not tell you about the nature of the being. And for some reason, that goes over some people's heads. If I say I had a message delivered today, okay, did it come through AOL Instant Messenger? Did it come through Facebook Messenger? Did it come by Messenger Pigeon? Did it come by a dog holding the message in his mouth? Did it come by a human on a bike messenger? What was the nature of the thing that gave you the message? See, a messenger is a job. It's a job description. it does not tell you what the nature of the being is. And we're going to get into the nature of these beings a little bit now, and more so when we get into angelology. So when people tell you an angel is just a messenger, they're not really answering any kind of question. We know that. The angels give messages. That's clear. However, let's talk about the nature of angels. So in order to further prove my point of how they can be wrong and right at the same time, you can go to Wikipedia and type in, or go to Google and type in Jewish ranks of angels. You don't have to use Wikipedia. These examples, 4 of them I'm going to give you, come from Wikipedia. But type in Jewish ranks of angels, and you will see Maimonides, for example, has 10, and you see the Malachim. The I-M is plural. Malachim. Malach is singular. That's why it says Malach Yahweh, the angel of the Lord. He was alone. Malachim Yahweh would have meant it was many angels of the Lord. So Malachim, the messenger angels, and then you have the B'nai Elohim, or the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of the godly beings, or the sons of God. So we see here that both can be true. Yes, angels can be called Malach, but there are multiple ranks. We have the B'nai Ha-Elohim, and we also have other ones you are familiar with. Cherubim, which are mentioned in the Bible, and the seraphim, which are mentioned in the Bible. So there's at least 4 different ranks of angels that you're familiar with right from the Bible. So Malach, yes, they can be angels, and cherubim can be angels, and seraphim can be angels, and B'nai Ha-Elohim can be angels. These are different ranks and different jobs. We see here in the Zohar, same thing. The Malachim are ranked at number 1, but the B'nai Ha-Elohim are ranked at number 9. Jacob Nazir, he separates them out as well. Malachim is at number 8. B'nai Elohim is at number 9. We see a pattern that the B'nai Ha-Elohim are very low until we come here and they're up a little bit higher with Abraham ben Isaac. He puts the B'nai Elohim at 3, and he puts the Malachim at 4. And he's the only one that lists the B'nai Elohim over the Malachim, if you're paying attention to that. So we see that outside sources, outside of the Bible, say, okay, Malachim are angels, and the B'nai Elohim are indeed angels. Now, these are just opinions, but we will see that this becomes consistent the more we start to dig into the sources. People say, okay, yes, these are angels. Where it becomes inconsistent, we'll get to that. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. So let's talk about the Book of Enoch. Not scripture, in my opinion, because it has not been handled with the care of the 66 books we call the canon, or the Bible. But it is a good historical reference because it was put together in 200 BC, and it was assembled from older beliefs that previously existed. So this is a very old belief system that these were angels and not human people. The sons of God were not human. And while we're on the subject, I know that there are some people that say, well, we shouldn't go outside the Bible to look for history. That makes no sense, because we go outside the Bible to look at every other bit of history. And people kept historical records during Bible times that were not Israelites. And so it is by these records that we know what's going on around the rest of the world, where we can say, okay, this is similar and this is similar. Let's see how they fit together. Now, the Book of Enoch is, to me, a great historical perspective to show you that people did indeed believe this. So these watchers were sent to watch over humankind. They started to lust after human women. And so it was 200 of them. And they're going to make a pact to go down and take these women and have sex with these women. So this is where the Book of Enoch, where I'm picking up with the Book of Enoch. And some Jaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were in all 200, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. So they swore an oath to do it. They followed through. They did it. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took wives of all which they chose. Consistent. And it said, and there were giants on the earth in those days. So they bare to them those children, right? This is from Genesis. I'm paraphrasing. So now let's see what the Book of Enoch continues to say. And they became pregnant, referring to the women. And they bare great giants whose height was 300 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. So there's a lot going on here that you didn't see in the Bible. You have cannibalism. And it's very vague. It says they begin to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. It doesn't say what that sin is. But we're gonna uncover that, because the more we start to dig, the more specific of what they were doing it's going to get. And when I say very, very specific, I'm going to tie it to something that happened just a few days ago in 2020. So they start to engage in cannibalism and drink blood and eat human flesh and sin against all of creation. So the Watchers, I mentioned the Watchers, you find them in the book of Daniel, but I Googled the word Watchers, and this is the info box that popped up from Wikipedia. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers are angels dispatched to earth to watch over the humans. They soon begin to lust for human women, and at the prodding of their leader Samyaza, defect in mass to illicitly instruct humanity and procreate among them. So we see that even the entry on Wikipedia says these were angels, a specific group of angels. Now, that's not proof of anything, but let's look at the Book of Jubilees. It was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, just like the Book of Enoch. The Book of Jubilees is called the Little Genesis, and it does give a little more in-depth commentary on the events in Genesis. And this is the Book of Jubilees, chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. And pay attention to how much more in depth, more information we start to get as we continue to dig. It adds on and adds on and adds on, not to the story, but it adds on to the clarity of the words in Genesis. And it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon, and they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bare unto them sons, and they were giants. So there's no confusion there in the Little Genesis. It says straightforward that these angels took human women and they had giant sons. Very straightforward and clear. Verse 2, and lawlessness increased in the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way alike, men and cattle and beast and birds and everything that walks on the earth. Remember, the giants began to sin against men and beast and cattle and birds. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other, and lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was thus evil continually. So they corrupted their orders. It means they didn't stay within the natural order. Cats were messing with dogs, and dogs were messing with, whatever else was out there. So you had cross species crossing. Now you might say that sounds crazy. That's not possible, but we're going to keep reading. This is one of the earliest mentions of genetic crossing that we have. And when I say earliest, not the earliest written, but the reference to the earliest time frame before Noah's flood. It's a reference to genetic crossing. Nothing was staying in its orders. They had corrupted their ways and their orders. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. Notice how this word corrupt is going to keep getting used in almost every text that we see. And all flesh had corrupted its orders, and all that were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said he would destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth, which he had created. But Noah found grace before the eyes of the Lord. All right, so we have that. Noah finds grace, just like he does in the book of Genesis. Everything is consistent so far. And against the angels, and now here we're going to get the punishment of the angels. We don't get this in the book of Genesis. We're going to get it in the Bible. It's going to talk about it, but not in the book of Genesis. And against the angels whom he had sent upon the earth, he was exceedingly wroth, and he gave commandments to root them out of all their dominion. And he bade us to bind them in the depths of the earth. And behold, they are bound in the midst of them and are kept separate. So they are bound in the midst of the earth, and they are kept separate. Now, this is important because Jubilees only gives us a little bit of this information. He tells us they're bound in the depths of the earth. So when you get to the book of Revelation, and you see that he tells them, unleash the angels that are bound in the river Euphrates, and unleash these angels that are bound. Ask yourself, when did those angels get bound and why? Why are their angels bound up already before we get to the book of Revelation? And yet we have no explanation in the Bible as to why they were bound. We'll keep going. So what does the New Testament say about the sons of God? Because some people will try to say, well, if we look at the New Testament, we can tell that these other sons of God were humans and not angels. So let's look at it. In John 1:11, this is the Gospel of John 1:11 through 13. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God, even to them that believed on his name, which were born not of blood, nor of the will of flesh, nor the will of man, but of God. So, in order to be a son of God, humans had to receive Christ and believe on the power of his, or believe on his name. They didn't have his name in the Old Testament in Genesis 6. They could not have received Christ in Genesis 6, which means they did not have the power to become sons of God, which means they were not considered the sons of God. When we go through the genealogy, it's in the Gospels. Adam is referred to as the son of God, and yet Seth is referred to as the son of Adam, not the son of God. He's referred to as the son of Adam. So here we have a situation where we don't have the power to be sons of God. So anybody trying to use this, which they do, is making more problems for themselves than they are solutions. So now they have to explain, wait, how are they the sons of God if they didn't have the power to be the sons of God until they got the name to believe on? But let's keep going. This is another one they'll use. 1 John 3:1 through 2. Behold, what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called sons of God. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God. And it doth not yet appear what we shall be, but we know that when we shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So now we have the power, meaning we did not have it before. Now we have the power to be called sons of God. This is John writing this, same John. This is in 1 John. The first one came out of the first reference came out of the Gospel of John, and now this is coming out of 1 John. He's saying we didn't have this ability before, and now we have it. If you go to Romans, Paul, he backs that up. Therefore, brethren, we are debtors not to the flesh to live after the flesh. For if ye live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if you through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, they are the sons of God. So again, if you're trying to use this and say, well, the Sethites were good and the daughters of Cain were evil, you run into another problem instead of just accepting the text. Because it is the sons of God who start taking wives of their choosing, which means if your theory is they weren't supposed to mix, then it is the Sethites that are disobeying God, which means they are not being led by the Spirit of God, because the Spirit of God will not lead you to disobey the Most High. You can't have it both ways. You can't say they're righteous and they were the ones who initiated the disobedience. And you can't say the women were evil when they had no choice in the matter. That says they took the wives of their choosing, meaning women had no say in this matter. So you can't have it both ways and say they're righteous and they're the sons of God, and yet they disobeyed God. It doesn't work. So it means that something else is going on here, and the sons of God are not humans. Now, before we continue, if you do not have this book in your library, part of your collection, A Dictionary of Angels by Gustav Davidson, I suggest you add it. There is a link in the description to this book. I bought this book in high school, and I used to read through that thing daily, just reading about the different angels from different beliefs and cultures. It has tons of angels in it, and not just from the Bible. I'm talking Islam. I'm talking about Christianity. I'm talking about Judaism. Every possible angel you can imagine is listed in this book. And you can just go through and read about the different types of angels throughout different belief systems. It's a pretty interesting book, and it's very good. So, aren't angels spirits without bodies? This is the next argument they're going to make. Now, I'm building upon this because I'm going to get to how this ties into end time prophecy. But it's important to understand, because if you don't understand everything that's going on in Noah, none of the other stuff is relevant. So angels being spirits without bodies. We're going to tackle this more in the angelology study. But for now, it's important to understand, because some people say, well, angels are spirits and they don't have flesh. Angels can't do this or that because they're spirits. And it's because they have not done any research on spirits. People just spout this stuff out because they don't want to look into anything that might upset their current doctrine or something their pastor may have told them. And yet in the Bible, we see angels, manna is called the food of angels. Angels grab Lot by the hand and remove him. Angels physically come and eat with Abraham. I mean, angel wrestled with Jacob. We see these angels all over the place. One kills 187,000 Assyrians. One kills all the children, the firstborn in Egypt. We see this all over the place. These angels are physically interacting. But we have the New Testament. Paul tells us that angels have flesh. So if we start reading at verse 39, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 39 through 41. All flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, and another of birds. There are also celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial, but the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. So we're going to have celestial bodies and terrestrial bodies. We have the flesh of fish, the flesh of beast, the flesh of fish, and the flesh of birds. This is important because if you're not specifically tracking this down, you might not catch this. We're going to see later on in Genesis, all flesh had been corrupted. It kept using that word corrupt. The Book of Jubilees said that men started to corrupt flesh by mixing the species. So we're gonna get deeper into that as we go. I don't want to jump ahead of myself. But yes, angels have flesh. Celestial flesh is one type of flesh, and terrestrial flesh is another. And we're gonna see as we get into this, Jude and Peter are gonna make some comments about it too. So right here we have the word 243 allos. We're gonna look at it in a second. So there's one kind allos of flesh for here we go, men. There's one kind of flesh for beast, and another for birds, and another for fish. Here's the word allos. It means another of more than two or different. So like all dogs have the same flesh, all cats, all fish, all birds have the same flesh, but bird flesh is different from fish flesh, which is different from cow's flesh. You know, people say red meat, white meat. Some people don't consider fish to be meat for whatever reason, but they have different kinds of flesh. And you can even see the consistency is different. Beef is not the same consistency as chicken, which is not the same consistency as fish. Everything has different types of flesh. And so the angelic flesh is not the same as human flesh. And right here, we see the word that's translated as celestial flesh is heavenly, 2032. Eperanios, 2032. Eperanios, heavenly, celestial. In the heavenly sphere, the sphere of spiritual activities. Metaphysical, divine, spiritual. So it's talking about heavenly flesh. Angels have flesh. That's why they can interact and touch people. But let's continue. So the next excuse they'll say is, well, angels may have flesh, but they can't procreate because Matthew says, the book of Matthew, chapter 22 says, angels don't get married and are not given in marriage. The angels of God in heaven. We're going to read that right now. And this is a very specific question about a woman who had been married to 7 brothers and they all die and they want to know whose wife she will be. And for some reason, this gets applied to every single believer, even though the question was very specific being asked because they were trying to trip up Christ in his answers. But if we read Matthew 22:30, it says, for in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. This did not take place in heaven. Genesis 6 says the sons of God came to the daughters of men. The daughters of men are on earth. We see that in the Book of Enoch, they make a pact to go down and do this. They're not doing this in heaven. They're making a pact to come down on earth and do this. In the Book of Jubilees, it says they came down on earth and did this. They were not in heaven. The angels of God in heaven don't marry and are not given in marriage. It says nothing about angels who break the rules and come to earth and try to engage in stuff they're not supposed to engage in. Number 2, the act of marriage, whether or not you get married, does not have any effect on your ability to procreate. Some of you listening right now were not married when you got pregnant and had your kids. So you are a walking testimony that you can have sex and you can get pregnant without getting married. And anybody who's in their right mind that's not absolutely crazy will acknowledge that that is a fact of life, that people get pregnant without being married and they get, you can have sex without being married. You can do both of those things. So to say angels can't do it based on this verse is misapplication of scripture. It's very, 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 very reaching. Well, then people say, well, God doesn't want you to have sex before marriage, so angels wouldn't do that. Again, they try to use the Bible to say that the Bible would be the rule book for angels. And again, that's a misapplication of everything we know. Angels don't have the same rules as humans. The Bible was written for humans. So there's nothing that says angels have to abide by this book. And the reason we know this to be true, that this is not the rules for all order of creation, is because animals don't get married and they're not given in marriage, and yet they still have sex and they procreate. So everything on this earth is not bound by the rules in the Bible. Humans are supposed to adhere to the rules in the Bible. And yet we see that humans are capable of doing all these things without marriage, just like the animals are capable of doing all these things without marriage. Everything that we've seen, most insects have sex to reproduce. Fish, birds, animals, humans, sex to reproduce, and yet we assume that angels are the only creation incapable of reproduction. Again, a lot of this comes from Eurocentric Christianity because we've been brainwashed, but there are some Eurocentric Christians who do believe the sons of God theory, a lot of them actually. So if you're sitting up in a church and you guys have never discussed this, you should go ask your pastor why this has never been a study, because this is one of the most important studies in the Bible, not only to understand angels, not only to understand the origin of mythology, but to understand the exact times we're living in right now, because there are other prophecies that go along with that 400-year slavery and curse ending. There are other prophecies that go along with Israel waking up. There's things going on in the supernatural realm that we see on TV every single day, and many of us don't know it because we don't do these studies in our churches. And when I say in our churches, I'm talking about those Israelites who still attend Christian churches. These studies aren't done in most camps, to my knowledge. I've never heard too many people from camps doing it. Like I said, Teo and Pastor Omar are the only two that I've heard tackle this subject recently. So let's talk about St. Augustine. St. Augustine is considered to be a church father by many. He was a Catholic, and he lived during a time when the Catholic Church had outlawed the teaching of the angel theory. They deemed it heresy under penalty of death because around 3rd century AD, Sextus Julius Africanus popularized this theory, which was passed down from Tanaic doctrine, a spoken doctrine. It was not written. And so when the Catholic Church latched onto it, they said, this is better than saying angels had sex with human women and created these giants. So now we'll say these were the sons of Seth and the daughters of Cain. And if anybody says different, we will kill them. So now you understand the kind of pressure St. Augustine was writing under. But as I say, when you try to dance around the truth of the Bible, you make things more difficult for yourself. So what we're going to see here from St. Augustine is the truth. Then we're going to see an outright lie. And then we're going to see one of the most convoluted explanations you've ever seen for anything in the Bible. And yet people refer to him as a church father. People take his word as if it's gold. So let's talk about Augustine. What did he say? And he's going to reference something during his events during his time. He's going to reference the days of Noah. And then he's going to give an explanation for how this is possible based on his Catholic view. So here we go. Many persons affirm that they have had the experience or have heard from such as have experienced it, that satyrs and fauns, whom the common folk call incubi, have often presented themselves before women and have sought and procured intercourse with them. We're going to stop right there for a second. It says many persons affirm or confirm, or this is true, basically is what he's saying, that they have had the experience or have heard from such as have experienced it. He's talking about his time right here. He said that satyrs and fauns, we're going to come back to satyrs and fauns because they're going to show up in the Bible and in Greek mythology. This is why they're mentioned by St. Augustine, whom the common folk call incubi. Incubi is a Latin plural for a male demon. You have the incubi, the singular is incubus, and then you have the succubi, which is the female demon, a bunch of them, more than one, and then the succubus is the singular. So he's connecting the satyrs and the fauns with demons. This is going to be important. Have often presented themselves before women and have sought and procured intercourse with them. Now, they don't differentiate between fallen angels and demons. So they're going to use the word angel and demon interchangeably. But he's saying that these satyrs and fauns have sought and procured sex with human women. He said, hence it is folly to deny it. Folly, foolishness. He's saying it's foolishness to deny that this is happening. And he's considered a church father. So if you're out there saying that the sons of Seth are that the sons of God are really the sons of Seth, I want you to see how convoluted he's about to get right now. and where he's going to backtrack because he said it's folly to deny that these demons are having sex with women. And he's going to come back and say this: but God's holy angels could not fall in such fashion before the deluge. Hence, by the sons of God are to be understood the sons of Seth. So he's saying, well, this is happening now, but it couldn't have happened in the days of Noah. Why not? How is that logical reasoning to say it's happening now in my time, but it couldn't have happened before the days of Noah? Because the Catholic Church would have killed him. It was heresy under penalty of death to teach that during the days of Noah that the angels did this. But it wasn't heresy to teach it during his time, that it was happening right then, which makes no sense. It says, let's see, hence the sons of God are to be understood the sons of Seth, who were good, while the daughters of men, the scripture designates those who sprang from the race of Cain. That's the outright lie. Nowhere in scripture do you ever see Cain's lineage referred to as the daughters of man. Never. The names Cain and Seth don't even appear in Genesis chapters 6 through 9, not once. It says B'nai Ha-Elohim, the sons of God, and Banath Adam, daughters of Adam. That's what it says. So nowhere in scripture does it say that. So there's Augustine's outright lie on the Bible. It says, nor is it to be wondered at that giants should be born of them. Why is that the case, that it should not be wondered at? It says, for they were not all giants. So he admits that there were giants born, albeit there were many more before than after the deluge. So he's saying, okay, it's not a mystery that these humans had giants. How is that not a mystery? That's not normal. And he says that there were more giants before the flood than after the flood. How is that normal? See, this is what happens when people are in denial and they try to twist the words of the Bible. Still, if some are occasionally begotten from demons, now he's trying to concede the point and saying, okay, well, if I'm wrong, this is how it would actually work. It is not from the seed of such demons, nor from their assumed bodies, but from the seed of men taken for the purpose. How would they acquire the seed of men? Ask yourself, if you keep reading it, stranger, as when the demon first assumes the form of the woman, why would a demon or a fallen angel first become a woman? Why? So it could have sex with a man and procure semen? It says, and afterwards of a man. So now it's going to turn into a woman, procure semen from a human man, then shapeshift back into a man. It's just so they can impregnate a woman. It says, just as they take the seed from other things for other generating purposes. Interesting. For other generating purposes. Why are they messing with other stuff? They're taking seed from men and other stuff. Remember, all flesh had become corrupted. All flesh had become corrupt. We're going to come back to that. It says, so that the person born is not the child of a demon, but of a man. So this is how they're explaining away. They're saying, okay, we'll admit that now people are being pursued by demons for sex, but it couldn't happen before the flood. And if it happened before the flood, it's because they shapeshifted into a woman first, got the semen from a man, shapeshifted back into a man to have sex with the woman. So it's really born of a woman because the semen really originally came from a man. None of that's in the Bible. Not once. But people call this guy a church father. So what about after the flood? And this is where we're going to talk about conjunctions. You have false teachers like Rob Skiba who teach that there was a Nephilim gene on board the ark in Ham's wife. And therefore the Hamites passed down the Nephilim gene. It's basically his cloak for racism to say that black people are tainted because he believes that black people came from Ham. He doesn't believe that we're Shemites or Israel. He believed that black people came from Ham and Ham's wife had the Nephilim gene. So therefore, black people are tainted with part angel. And as I pointed out in the Bible, the scripture shows that Shemites and Hamites mixed with each other. So that means if Ham had it, Shem had it. And who doesn't have it, according to Rob Skiba? Japheth, the European, the pure white Christian race is what he teaches. He teaches white racial purity, but he disguises it as some kind of biblical teaching. But that's in essentially what he's teaching. White racial purity, and everybody else is mixed or contaminated. So before you guys get awed by false teachers like Rob Skiba, if you run into his work, just understand what's at the root of their teaching. I've known Rob for a long time. You guys can go back to 2010 and 2011, 2012, all the way up and through there and see how much stuff I've done with Rob Skiba. You can go read his book, Babylon Rising. He references my book as The Days of Noah, where in his book multiple times he wrote me for permission He wrote me while he was he emailed me and told me he planned to quote my book in his book. And he got the okay for me to put the references in my book. Me and Rob used to talk on the phone on a regular basis. So it's not that I'm telling you this and I have no kind of history with Rob. I knew Rob Skiba. I used to be in constant communication with Rob Skiba. I never got involved with his Hebrew roots stuff, but me and Rob had a major contention on this issue about the Nephilim because I told him I felt like he was lying and it was white supremacy disguised as biblical doctrine. And I told Rob that. And I still to this day will call him a false teacher over that because I told him that. And he still continued to teach it anyway, even though the evidence pointed to something else. So let's talk about conjunctions real quick. Because people will say, well, we know how they got there before the flood, but what about after the flood? A conjunction, a word used to connect clauses or sentences or to coordinate words in the same clause. Examples, and, but, if. The word and is a conjunction. It joins two things together. So let's look here. We see before and after the flood, right? So we're going to come to Genesis 6, verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days and also after that. That is a conjunction. It joins these two thoughts together. In those days and also after that. There's no separate explanation. They are joined together by the word and. It is a conjunction. I hope we're on the same page. So now when we get the explanation, it refers to both. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. When were the giants on the earth? In those days and also after that. Period. Not period in the sentence, but that's what it says, a conjunction. There's no arguing with that. There's a conjunction. So let me step back for a second. So we have the conjunction there, right? Now, this is the word I want to talk about. It's going to explain right here. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. People will say, well, that explains the first time, but what about after that? Again, the conjunctions there. I don't have to keep saying the word conjunction, hopefully. But there's a word in there that actually gives it a little bit of context. It gives it a little bit of clarity if we look at that word, and that word is when. It seems like an insignificant word. So we have the word when here, 834. Notice it sits out by itself. If it was an insignificant word, it probably wouldn't sit out by itself like that. It is the word Asher, A-S-H-E-R, same as the name of the tribe of Israel, but it's not used as a proper noun. 834. So now we're going to pull up 834. Asher. Who, which, that. Now, particle of relation, connecting link, conjunction, adverb, conjunction, relative, particle, pronoun, conjunction, right? So we just talk about conjunctions. So we have the conjunction and when is conjunction. So all this is connected. There were giants on the earth in those days. And also after that, when, which is joining it to the previous statement, the sons of God came into the daughters of men. Now, if we look at that word when, and we still come down here into all the other possible translations, there are some interesting translations when you start to plug these in. There were giants in the earth in those days and also after that, because, notice that it's translated as because the most, or actually the second most, 166 is what? But because the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. Here's another one. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, everywhere the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. Let's keep going. We can look at a few more just in context. Whenever the sons of God came into the daughters of men. Wherever the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. Let me see. And yeah, we can look at that and see. So anyway, if we plug those words in, we start to get a different context. And now it starts to make sense why we see hybrids or Nephilim in Numbers 13:33 in the promised land. Because after these angels did what they did, there's the punishment. Jubilees told us they are bound in the earth. And you will get false teachers that say, well, the other angels saw this and they were so scared that they would never do it again. Even though that's not in scripture, that's completely fabricated. But what we see throughout history is other angels doing this. We have records of the gods, lowercase g, who are, in my opinion, angels that were mistaken for gods because they did not have the lens, the spiritual lens of the Bible or scripture to tell them that these are angels and not gods, as in capital G, but these are angels, lowercase g, gods that are doing this. And they're not to be worshiped because they're doing the wrong thing. And if you continue to get into some of this stuff, once we get into angelology, we'll talk about it more. But every culture reports the wrongdoings of their gods with the lowercase g. They rape, they enslave, and they basically destroy mankind. And we're going to see that this is what they do. So wouldn't this result in hybrid children? And that's a valid question. So people ask that question. They'll say, okay, well, if these angels had sex with humans, what were the Nephilim? Weren't they hybrids? These giants, they were hybrids. And the answer is yes. We have the stories of the Nephilim. And so we're going to come right back to Genesis 6. Genesis 6, we're going to start at verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So it tells us, it gives us enough information about these giants in Genesis 6. We have a ton of information up to this point. We're going to get further into the chapter in a minute, but it tells us that they were the sons of angels. It tells us they were mighty men, and it tells us they were men of renown. But what does that word renown mean? We're going to break down all of these. So the word Nephilim right here, the word Nephilim, 5303. So you can see 5303 Nephilim. It means giants, the names of two peoples, one before the flood and one after the flood. Giants on the earth in those days and also after that. You're going to have the Nephilim in Genesis 6, and then in Numbers 13:33, they're going to encounter the Nephilim again, which is why they were so scared to go in, and only Joshua and Caleb wanted to go in. Now, if you didn't understand that passage before in the book of Numbers, remember I told you it's going to be key to understanding Exodus through 2 Samuel. If you don't understand why these people were so frightened, why 10 of the 12 spies were so frightened because they look like grasshoppers in the sight of the Nephilim, is because this is the history. Nephilim were cannibals. Remember they said the land eateth up the inhabitants thereof. This is a reference to the cannibalism going on that we read about in the Book of Jasher. We're going to read about it in the Book of Enoch. So now you have some context as to what's going on. These were giant cannibals that they wanted to go in and fight. Well, Joshua and Caleb wanted to go in and fight. Nobody else wanted to go fight. Now, how we get the word giants into our Bible, from Nephilim to giants. There's an in-between phase, the LXX or the Greek Septuagint. When they had to translate the Old Testament into Greek, they translated the word Nephilim into gigantes. Now remember, they're translating it into Greek so people who speak Greek can read these words. And the Greeks associated the gigantes with mythological giants, which means that the people translating the Bible saw that word Nephilim and associated and said, what's the closest thing we can do? We can associate it with the gigantes so they get the idea that these are supernatural giants. And then later on, you're going to have the Titans as well, which are giants. Well, actually not later on, but the Titans were, I believe, prior to the giants, but the Titans are giants. The Titans were prior to the gigantes. Let me say it that way. The gigantes were one set of giants and the Titans were another set of giants that were considered gods. But they translated into gigantes, which means earthborn. And that right there is going to be important because earthborn is going to be referenced again in another book. So it says the gigantes were a tribe of 100 giants born of the earth goddess Gaia. According to some, she was impregnated by the blood of the castrated sky god Uranus. At the urging of Gaia, the gigantes waged war on the gods and were destroyed in the ensuing battle. And you will find that that the hybrid offspring of the angels and the gods in different stories, they never get along. That is a consistent theme through biblical related stories, the ones outside of the Bible that are biblically linked, and then the outright mythologies of other cultures. The gods and their children did not get along. It says, at the urging of Gaia, the gigantes waged war on the gods and were destroyed in the ensuing battle. The most famous of the combatants was Enceladus, who was buried by Athena beneath Mount Etna, Polybotes, who was crushed by the island cast by Poseidon, and Porphyrion, who was slain by Zeus and Heracles, or as you know him, Hercules, probably, when he attempted to violate the goddess Hera. The giants were depicted as either spear-wielding hoplite warriors in armor or primitive clothed in animal skins and armed with rocks and flaming brands. In scripture and mosaic art, they were usually depicted with the tails of serpents in place of legs. Now, that's not the usual depiction, but it is a depiction. Is that you'll have these giants that are hybrid with snakes and stuff. This is going to be important because we're going to come back to this. This stuff sounds like, hey, this is just mythology. He's just teaching us mythology. But no, I'm not teaching you mythology. I'm teaching you modern science. Some of you just don't know it yet. So the men of renown. Right here it says became the mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So let's look up the word renown. I googled the word renown. It says the condition of being known or talked about by many people. Fame. So these children became famous. Right. So if the words of the scripture is true, let's give you two scenarios. If these were the sons of Seth and Cain, the sons produced from the Sethite men marrying the women of Cain, we should have famous sons of Seth and daughters of Cain combos. We should know of them. They should be famous, right? But if I'm right and the angels, the hybrids, were what were produced in Genesis, we should have tales of famous hybrids. Now, what we know is that the flood came and they wiped out all of the sons of Seth. So they couldn't have been that righteous. It wiped out all the daughters of Cain and it wipes out all the hybrids. So we have no way to tell if they were famous during that time. However, we have the Ha-Gibborim. We're gonna come back to the fame in just a second. We have the Ha-Gibborim. It says they were strong and mighty. They were, let me go back for a second. They were mighty men. That's the word Ha-Gibborim here. Strong, mighty. Gibor. The reason we're going to touch on that is because in part 2, when we talk about Nimrod, some people, again, false teachers like Rob Skiba, will teach that Nimrod became a Nephilim. But if we're paying attention to the wording, because it says Nimrod became a mighty hunter before the Lord, and they'll say, well, the Gibborim are giants, and therefore Nimrod became a giant. But that's not true. It says the Nephilim, the giants, became Gibborim. They became mighty ones, right? The reason we know that this is not going to refer to they became giants is because David is going to have his mighty men. David is referred to as Gibborim. Lots of people are referred to as Gibborim throughout the Bible. And the key is to apply it evenly to all. You can't say that Nimrod became a Nephilim because it says he's Gibborim and then tell me David wasn't a Nephilim even though it says he's Gibborim. You can't have it both ways. So Gibborim refers to their might and not their stature. So let's keep going. So did this only happen in the Bible? And of course not. I've been showing you that it's not only in the Bible, but it's in the Book of Enoch. It's in the Book of Jubilees. It's in Greek mythology. It's in Egyptian mythology. It's in Roman mythology. It's in modern mythology. And I put the word mythology in quotation marks because that's what people like to call it when they don't research it and they don't understand it, instead of referring to it as what it is. It's history. Now I want to show you something. Let's talk about the offspring, the heroes and the Nephilim. So the Nephilim are in the Bible and the heroes are going to be outside of the Bible. They're referred to as the heroes. You have the Gigantes, the earthborn. This actually kind of springs over into both. I put that there because we have the Septuagint version of the Bible does contain the Greek mythological Gigantes in there, translated from the word Nephilim, which is how we got the word giants in our Bible. So there are angel-human hybrids in the Bible. And they are usually giants with supernatural strength. They vary in sizes from Goliath up to Og and bigger than that. But in the pagan cultures, they are God-human hybrids instead of angel-human hybrids. They're not always giants, but always had supernatural abilities. So you're starting to see a pattern here. That this stuff is consistent when you start to look around and say, hey, what was going on in the ancient world that everybody was writing this stuff? So let's talk about it. And I said, if I'm right, we should be able to find hybrids in history that are famous and we know who they are. We don't know any sons of Seth that any offspring from the sons of Seth and daughters of Cain that are famous. You can't name one, not even in the Bible. It says they became famous. So if they were famous, they would have at least been mentioned at least once. But we don't find that. We have Goliath in the Bible. He comes from the Nephilim. He's born to the giant in Gath. And remember, I said this is key to understanding Exodus through 2 Samuel. So if you if you want to know how Goliath and his 4 brothers and their fathers, 6 of them ended up in Gath to fight, or you ended up fighting David. They're from Gath. You have to go back and read the book of Joshua, where when they invaded, some of the giants fled. But you have to go back and read the book of Numbers to understand what they were up against. They were up against the Nephilim. And in order to understand who the Nephilim are, you have to go back to the days of Noah. And to understand what's going to be coming up, you have to go to Matthew 24 and listen to Christ. As the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So you have Goliath, who is a famous hybrid. You have Gilgamesh, who was part man, part God. And you can see that this statue of Gilgamesh shows him holding a lion in his arms, like it's a cat. This is a full lion. You see the mane? This is a lion. He's holding it like a baby cat. You have Hercules from the Greek myths. Gilgamesh is from Sumer. And if you know the story of Gilgamesh, people say, well, the Bible copied the flood story from Gilgamesh. No. Gilgamesh in the book of, in his book, he goes and looks for Utnapishtim, the survivor of the flood, a.k.a. Noah. He wants to find the secret of immortality because him and his sons survived the flood, and he wants to know how he did it. You have to go read this stuff for yourself, because the most churches that many of us came out of, they will tell you not to even look at this stuff because it's mythology. We don't need to bother with it. But there's a story of a hybrid out there going to look for the survivor of the flood so that he can learn how he survived the flood, or the secret of immortality. And when he finds Utnapishtim won't tell him. It makes sense that Noah wouldn't tell a hybrid how he survived the flood. But you guys can chase that down on your own. Now, Hercules, same thing. This is Cerberus, the 3-headed dog that guards Hades. This is not a regular sized dog. This is a giant dog. It's the dog of one of the gods, Hades. And you see Hercules has him hemmed up right here with one arm, because Hercules is super strong because he's the son of a god, aka an angel, and a human woman. These are famous hybrids. They are the mighty ones, the men of renown. Why didn't people want to fight Goliath? Because he was a man of war. He was a mighty one. Gilgamesh can hold a lion like a baby cat because he's a mighty one. Hercules can subdue the dog of the gods with one arm because he's a mighty one. They are men of renown, famous hybrids. This is stuff you're not going to get in a traditional church. They're not going to tell you this stuff because they don't want you looking at it. So let's talk about the perfection of Noah. See, it gets deeper in Genesis than just the surface level text. Especially if you come from a church with surface level text, you're not going to dive into a lot of this stuff. Noah's perfection is alluded to his physical perfection. And I'm going to show you right now. Because you'll get people telling you, well, Noah was perfect and just, and that meant Noah was righteous, and that's all there is to it. But that's not true. So we're going to Genesis 6:5 through 10. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Didn't we see that before in the book of Jubilees? So it's consistent. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. The text indicates that it was physically painful to God to see what was going on. Go to BibleHub.com, type in Genesis 6:6, and click interlinear and click the word grieved. It talks about a physical pain. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and the creeping things and the fowl of the air, for it repenteth me that I made them. Why would God destroy all of the animals? The same reason when you see them go into the promised land and he tells them to destroy every man, woman, child, and animal of certain tribes. They were tainted. So like I said, you have to understand what was going on in the days of Noah to catch some of the stuff going on in Exodus through 2 Samuel. So he's grieved that he'd made mankind. What did the Book of Enoch say? They started to sin against the animals. What did the Book of Jasher say? They started to experiment on the animals. What did the Book of Jubilees say? They started to tamper with the animals, and they weren't in their orders anymore. Everything was being tampered with. That's why God is going to wipe out all flesh, and he commands them to take two of certain animals. It may not have been a bunch of animals to take because they were being tampered with. It says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And later on, we're going to see that not only did Noah find grace, which is salvation, but he was saved through the baptism, which is the flood. The flood becomes a symbol of baptism. That tells us that in the Bible. That's not something I had to dig up. It tells us that outright in the Bible. It says, these are the generations of Noah, and Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. And Noah begat 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So if my idea is correct, that Noah was My position is that Noah was morally just and physically perfect. Not like he was the perfect person, but he was untainted by the stuff that was going on around him. He wasn't mixed with anything. Nobody had tampered with his genetics. That's my belief. And if my belief is true, we should be able to find more evidence of that. However, if it's only about morality, which I don't disagree with, I believe Noah was just and he was morally just. So I'm not going to argue against that. However, I believe there's more to it. And if I'm incorrect, we shouldn't be able to find anything to support what I'm saying. Nothing at all. But if we break down Genesis 6:9, we see that it's interesting how the words are used. Noah was a just man and righteous. Right here, righteous, 662, this is going to be Sadiq, and Tamim. He was righteous and blameless. Look how Tamim is translated, 8549. Noah was righteous and blameless. Sadiq and Tamim, right? So now most people stop there and say, okay, well, that proves that Noah was righteous and there's nothing else going on. So let's look at the word Tamim real quick. 8549, Tamim, 8549. Complete, sound. But when you start to digging into some of this, you find some interesting alternative explanations. Noah was entire. He was full. He was intact. He was unblemished. He was without blemish. He was without defect. And notice that without defect is the most translated way. 36 times they translate this same word as without defect. What does that mean? Noah was without defect. So now, if you look at it again, Noah was a righteous man and without defect in his generation. Why is that important? Because Noah, in my opinion, is fully human. His wife is fully human, and their kids are fully human, and their kids' wives are fully human. Otherwise, the purpose of the flood is defeated by allowing someone with a Nephilim gene on the ark, which false teacher Rob Skiba says, that Ham's wife was on the ark with that Nephilim gene, which is going to taint 2/3 of humanity at minimum. Just by the Shemites mixing with the Hamites, everybody's going to become tainted except for Japheth, who are the Europeans. Again, that white male purity that he teaches disguised as Christian doctrine. So let's talk about it, the perfection of Noah. Again, if I'm wrong, I shouldn't find any evidence that there's a connection to this untainted Noah or free from blemish or without defect right here. So let's look into the book of Leviticus. I told you before, it's going to explain a lot of stuff from Exodus through 2 Samuel. And the Lord spake unto Moses. This is Leviticus 4, 1-3. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a soul shall sin through ignorance against any of the commandments of the Lord concerning things which ought not to be done, and shall do against any of them, if the priest that is anointed to do sin according to the sin of the people, then let him bring for his sin, which he hath sinned, a young bullock without blemish unto the Lord for a sin offering. Without defect, without blemish, right? Same word, Tamim. Leviticus 4:3, right here, 8549, Tamim. So I want you guys to see it, 8549, 8549. So now, he's supposed to bring a bull that is Tamim. If this is reference to moral character, how can an animal be how can an animal be morally perfect? That doesn't make sense. How would you know if an animal has morals? How would you know what an animal's morals are? How would you know if an animal is morally perfect? This is referring to the bullock's physical appearance without blemish, tamim. So we have at least one example in the Bible to where it's referred to in the physical nature. And as I pointed out, it is the same exact word. I just want you guys to see 8549 tamim, 8549 tamim. So here it's translated as blameless, probably because the translators may not have had all of this in context. And here it is translated without blemish. So Noah was righteous morally and physically untainted or without blemish. Again, that's not proof, but I'm going to continue showing you. As we read the rest of Genesis, we see that something is wrong with the flesh. Remember, God is already going to destroy all the birds, the beasts, the animals, the people, everything. Then we see an indication that Noah is physically perfect. We saw in the book of Jasher that they were tampering with all flesh. Or we're going to see in the book of Jasher. Let me see the earth. Let's see. Let's go back to Genesis 6:11. Let me not get ahead of myself. Genesis 6:11 through 13. Yeah, we're not going to read the instructions for the ark. Genesis 11 through 13. The earth also was corrupt before God, that the word of corrupt again, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. What did it say? They started to eat mankind. The earth was filled with violence. All flesh had corrupted its way. Again, how do animals become corrupt? Let's go over here and look at these words. This is the word corrupt, 7843, 7843. The word corrupt, 7843, shakath. Just to make sure we're on the same page, corrupt, 7843, corrupted, 7843, perhaps to go to ruin. All flesh had went to ruin. How is that possible? How did the animal flesh go to ruin? You go down here, read some of these words, corrupted, destroyed. Let's come over here, ruin, jeopardized, laid waste, polluted, spoiled, ravaged. All flesh had become ravaged and spoiled and polluted and destroyed and jeopardized and harmed right here. All flesh had gone to ruin. How is this possible? Now we get to the book of Jasher. I kept saying we saw in the book of Jasher, but now we're going to see in the book of Jasher, which again, I do not use as scripture, but I use as historical reference because the book of Jasher gives us more insight. It builds upon everything we've learned from the book of Enoch and from the book of Jubilees and from other parts of the Bible we read. Jasher tells us what was happening, the details, how all flesh became corrupted. And here, before we get into Jasher, you see Medusa. It's a woman with snakes in her hair. Sometimes she's depicted with a snake's body, sometimes not. But she was a Gorgon in mythology. She was a hybrid. Now, Jasher chapter 4, verses 16 through 21 is going to tell us a little bit more detail. Excuse me. And all the sons of men departed. Now, before I start, Jasher does interpret the sons of God as humans. It does interpret the Nephilim as judges and rulers. It does not interpret them as supernatural means. That's where it disagrees with everything. However, everything else in Jasher, except for the interpretation of who was what, agrees with everything else that we've seen so far. So, and all the sons of men departed from the ways of the Lord in those days, as they multiplied upon the face of the earth with sons and daughters. And they taught one another their evil practices, and they continued sinning against the Lord. Now, in the book of Enoch, it says some Yahs and the angels came down and taught men these evil practices, and then the men did them. So there is not really necessarily a contradiction, because the men did do those practices, but they were taught those practices from the angels, according to Enoch. And every man made unto himself a god, and they robbed and plundered every man his neighbor as well as his relative, and they corrupted the earth, and the earth was filled with violence. Okay, so the earth was corrupted. And it says, and their judges and rulers went to the daughters of men and took their wives by force from their husbands according to their choice. They took wives of all which they chose. Here it says judges and rulers, but the Bible says the sons of God, the angels, did this. They took them all wives of which they chose. This one says they took them from other men by force. And the sons of men in those days took from cattle of the earth, the beast of the field, and the fowls of the air, and taught the mixtures of animals of one species with another. Didn't Jubilees say everything had corrupted their order? In the Bible, it says all flesh has been corrupted. All flesh has been polluted, ravaged, ruined. Corrupted right here. Ravaged, ruined. All flesh had been wasted. So this is where we find out what exactly they were doing. They were teaching they taught the mixture of animals of one species with another in order therewith to provoke the Lord. And God saw the whole earth, and it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth, all men and all animals. And the Lord said, I will blot out man that I created from the face of the earth, yea, from man to the birds of the air, together with cattle and beasts that are in the field, for I repent that I made them. And all men who walked, and so we're not going to get into that part right there. That's going to go away from what we're talking about. So all the flesh had been corrupted because they started to mix these species with one another. Remember, let me go back to Christ in Matthew 24. For as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Keep that in the back of your mind. All of this is going to be consistent. This is why we need to know the days of Noah. So let's talk about some of the corruption that was going on. Here we see a centaur. We see these horse-human hybrids, and we see a satyr. I almost said minotaur, but we have a satyr, a goat-human hybrid, and the minotaurs were bull-human hybrids. So we see these human hybrids, and we see this And we say, oh, that's mythology. That stuff didn't exist. But again, go back to St. Augustine. Augustine was a Catholic under penalty of death, and he still said, this is happening. These things are real. It's going on right now in my day. And it would be foolish to deny that this is happening. He calls anybody denying it a fool. But real quick. So we have this right here. We have, again, I want to show you Medusa again. We have a hybrid woman with snakes in her hair. We have a centaur mixed with a man mixed with horse. We have the satyr, a man mixed with a goat. We have the minotaurs, a man mixed with a bull. And it says right here, they taught the mixture of animals of one species with another in order therewith to provoke the Lord. So let's talk about satyrs in the Bible. So I had a debate, and the link is in the description. The debate I had on the days of Noah with Brother Matthias. He is a white Christian brother, and he does agree with me on a lot of stuff, including the fact that Israelites are black. And so he asked me to do a team debate with him a while back, and I did. And we debated the Nephilim and the days of Noah. And you will find that the other two guys had already made up their mind what they wanted to believe, and no matter what evidence, they tried to twist it in a way that benefited them. But in one part of the conversation, one of the guys says, well, satyrs are mythology. That's not in the Bible. Satyrs are not in the Bible. And I said, yes, they are. And I had him turn to Isaiah 13. And here's why this is important. Again, I told you I was going to tie this to what's going on in today's time. Now, in Isaiah 13, it's talking about the fall of Babylon. If you guys have listened to Teo Ministries, they have told you who Babylon is. This is a reference to the end times kingdom. Go listen to their studies, and they'll tell you who Babylon is. They get into that. Teo Ministries, TEOTW, for those that don't know. And so we talked about the satyrs here, the fall of Babylon. Isaiah 13, we're going to look at verse 19 through 22. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch their tent there, neither shall the shepherd make their fold there. And wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and owls shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the island shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant places, and her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. Dragons is an interesting reference. I personally believe dragons are hybrid creatures mixed with a lot of stuff. I don't believe that they were mythological 100%. They may not have been those big fire-breathing winged creatures that we see, but there are depictions. Let me see if I can go back to it real quick. I think we passed it. If we did not pass it, I will. All right. We didn't pass it. All right. So it's coming up. I'll show you guys in a second. All right. So we're going to go back through all this. Anyway, so the satyrs are my point. I didn't want to get sidetracked anyway. All right. So the satyrs are my point here. Here we go. So the satyrs are my point. The satyrs are goat-human hybrids. So during this debate, I bring up the satyrs. So now he's proven wrong because he's already said satyrs aren't in the Bible. And I said, yes, they are. And I showed him satyrs in the Bible, 2 places. It's Isaiah 13 and I believe Isaiah 22. I have to go check that out. But I didn't want to pull up all those because I can make my point with one reference. But especially this Babylon reference. Because this Babylon reference is going to come up again. Remember, if your doctrine is based in truth, there's going to be consistency. So look at the word satyr here. We have wild goats. This is 8163 Serene. It says it's translated as wild goats. 8163 Sa'ir. It's going to be, the definition is hairy. However, when you go deeper, when you dig deeper, satyrs in the Bible, you will find that in the Brown Driver Briggs, it equates satyr with demons, which made me start to dig a little bit more. And you will find that the Sa'ir, the fearful ones, the hairy ones, are mentioned all throughout the Old Testament and is translated as devils at some points. It's not always translated as satyrs. Sometimes it's translated as devils or demon, which is why they associated with a demon. But if you come down here, and if you listen to the debate, you will see that as they started reading this part, they latched on to a point that they wanted, and they will repeat it. He says, he-goat, by analogy, a fawn, devil. And he stops and he goes, a fawn, that's what it is, a baby deer, a fawn. And I said, look up the word fawn and make sure you spell it as presented there, F-A-U-N. They did not want to do that. They kept saying a fawn, a baby deer. And you'll hear that in the debate. Now, if you Google faun, it tells you one of a class of lustful rural gods represented as a man with a goat's horns, ears, legs, and tail. Faun is sometimes confused with fawn, F-A-W-N, which is what they were talking about. But they had already made up their mind that they wanted to believe that this stuff wasn't real. And so they didn't do any actual research. They latched onto a word, made up their own definition for the word, because as you can see, this is not the definition of this kind of faun. And they said, yeah, that's what it is. It's a faun. Yes, that's exactly what I was telling you. And in their mind, they had just proven that the satyr, the mythological mention of the satyr was nothing more than a baby deer. And that's not true. And you guys can go check out the debate. The link's in the description right here. And from Wikipedia. Now, this definition is from Oxford, the Oxford Dictionary. This is from Wikipedia. The faun is a mythological half-human, half-goat creature appearing in ancient Rome. The goat man, more commonly affiliated with the satyrs of Greek mythology than the fauns of Roman, are bipedal. So we have these creatures mentioned in the book of Isaiah. We see they are associated with demons. This is going to come back up. So they'll say, well, aren't you just trying to use the Bible to justify a belief in mythology? I've had people ask me this many times because they don't understand, because their pastor has not taught them this. Their camp leader has not taught them this. This is not something that they've discussed, and so they don't understand how this is applicable and why this is not mythology. This is biblical and modern. So let's talk about modern science. If this is all mythology, remember Christ said, as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So if I'm right, we should be able to find this. If I'm wrong, we shouldn't be able to find this in modern times. If everybody else is right about the sons of God being the sons of Seth, we should be able to find the sons of Seth mixing with the daughters of Cain right now. But we can't because they were killed in the flood. But we saw that they were mixing species as well. So far, the outside sources have told us that they were mixing species. The Bible tells us everything had become corrupt, all flesh. All flesh. Remember, all flesh is not the same flesh. There's different kind of man, birds, fish, beast, everything. Different kinds of flesh. All flesh had become corrupt because they were mixing it. So here in the 1920s, we see a humanzee. The humanzee is a hypothetical chimpanzee-human hybrid. An unsuccessful attempt to create such a hybrid was made by Aya Ivanovich in the 1920s. The portmanteau word humanzee for a human-chimpanzee hybrid appears to have entered usage in the 1980s. Now, if the video is still out there on YouTube, I will go look for it and add it to the description. But Jesse Ventura, his show Conspiracy Theory, he does a episode on the humanzee. And it was the first time I had heard of it. And during the episode, he found evidence that the humanzee was not a failed experiment. Some of the experiments failed, but he found evidence that they had succeeded in some of them. And so he goes to a location which is rumored to have a humanzee, and it's supposed to be a privately owned company, and he's met with armed guards, government guards. So something else is going on there. You guys can watch that episode of Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura on your own, where he investigates the humanzee. But it'd be one thing if this was the only example. We have from 2003, the Washington Post, cloning yields human rabbit hybrid embryo. I Googled human rabbit hybrid because I had wrote about it in the Days of Noah. You get 28 million results if you Google human rabbit hybrid. Human pig hybrid created in the lab. This is from National Geographic. Here are the facts. This is 2017. 2019, Japan approves first human animal embryo experiments. This is from nature.com. And again, from 2003, rabbit human embryos reported. Chinese scientists mixed DNA. Here's another article. All these articles the links are in the description. First human monkey hybrid embryo was created in China. This is 2019, August 13th. Now, it's funny. It's almost 16 years to the date. This is the 13th. This is the 14th. Rabbit human embryos reported. Chinese scientists mixed DNA. 16 years later, they're creating monkey human hybrids in China. Here's another one. 5 chimeras created by science. A chimera is an organism with genetic material from 2 or more sources. Experiments in the field may save lives, but are ethically controversial. And here's the Greek chimera. This is why they said it's 2 or more sources. Genetic material from 2 or more sources. It's a lion with a snake for a tail and a goat's head attached to its body for some reason. It looks like just some random experiment gone wrong. And so we see that Everything I'm saying that was happening in the days of Noah is happening right now. That's not deniable. They're mixing creatures right now. Behold, all flesh had become corrupt. And if you continue reading that book, unless those days were shortened, no flesh should be saved. This is right out of the New Testament. Unless those days were shortened, no flesh should be saved. Go find that and read the context for yourself. That's a little bit of homework for you. Go find that Bible verse. Unless those days are shortened, talk about the end times, no flesh should be saved. But as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. We have sheep-human hybrids made in the lab. Get the facts. This is from 2018. Building on a controversial breakthrough made in 2017, scientists announced on Saturday that they have created the second successful human-animal hybrids, sheep embryos that are 0.01% human by cell count. What makes you think they won't go over that? We're talking about hybrids right here in modern times. So when people said I was crazy in 2010 when I released this book, people were telling me I was stretching it and that I was reading into stuff and I was believing mythology. And yet here we are in 2019 and I'm showing you the receipts. I'm showing you that everything I have been saying is happening right now. Human animal hybrids are coming and could be used to grow organs for transplant. A philosopher weighs in. This is from August 2nd, 2019. They are growing human organs in pigs. I had pointed out before that they had pigs with human blood flowing through them. So now they're growing human organs in pigs. But let's talk about the moral and religious implications of this. What if you're a Muslim, or what if you're a kosher Jew, or what if you're an Israelite, and you need a organ transplant? And there are no human organs available, and yet there are thousands upon thousands of organs available that have been grown in pigs. Is that breaking God's law to have something that's part pig put in you that could save your life? Now, some of you may say, I'd rather die than have pig parts put in me because that's not of the Most High. But what about your child? How many of you would watch your child die knowing you could save your child when there's an animal out there that you could pull apart from and save your child? How many of you will watch your child die? See, the decision is easy when it comes to us. It's harder when we have children that we have to watch go through it knowing we could save them. See, this is what's going to make a lot of things so difficult. Behold, all flesh had become corrupted. So meet the Xenobot, the world's first. This is from 2020. This is January 14th, 2020. Now, this is just a few days ago. January 14, 2020, meet the Xenobot, world's first living self-healing robots created from frog stem cells. What do you think they're going to use those for? I have no clue what they're going to use those for. However, we see what's happening right now. So let me point this out. This is from a wiki about parahumans. Parahuman is not a word that's used a lot, but I do want to read you some of this. Parahumans, it says human animal hybrids. Parahumans are also referred to as human animal hybrids. The term parahuman is not used in scientific publications. The term is sometimes used to sensationalize research that involves mixing biological materials from humans and other species. It was used in a National Geographic article to describe an experiment in 2003 during which Chinese scientists at the Shanghai Second Medical University successfully fused human cells with rabbit eggs. Now, when we come down to the rationale part, there's something interesting mentioned in the rationale, and you should go research this, the difference between a germline parahuman and a somatic parahuman. It's going to give you a little bit here, but there's a difference between germline parahumans and somatic parahumans. Right here. We're going to come down to the second paragraph. If parahumans are created using germline engineering, they breed true and are different enough from ordinary humans to be unable to breed with them, so they say. This would qualify them as being a distinct species. They're talking about creating a whole new species of human animal hybrids. Again, as the days of Noah were, what happened? All flesh had become corrupted. Noah was the only one that was just and pure. He was the only one untainted, him and his family. Parahumans created using only somatic genetic engineering would have normal children. So now they can mix people with animals and they can reproduce. Another key difference is that germline parahumans will most likely be modified before birth, while a somatic parahuman could be an adult human who chooses to be modified. The latter is sometimes seen as more ethical because the changes are made with informed consent. A counter argument is that no harm is done to a person born with modified genes because the person had no control over their genetics in the first place. So they're talking about creating whole new species and mixing up mankind with animal. They're talking about having somebody who's a somatic parahuman change their DNA to be part animal DNA, and they can go reproduce with regular people, and their offspring will have part of that animal DNA. Do you understand what it says when it says, unless those days are shortened, no flesh should be saved? As the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. All flesh had become corrupted. According to the Book of Jubilees, everything was corrupting its order. Animals were mixing with animals they weren't supposed to be mixing with. The Book of Jasher tells us that the people were doing this. They were mixing things that weren't supposed to be mixed together, and we see it now. This isn't just mythology. This is modern science. What we call mythology occurs in the past and right now. But if I was 100% off, we wouldn't be able to find any of this. All of this would be complete mythology. And so I did this a few years ago in 2011. I put out this video, Animal Human Hybrids, Transhumanism and the Bible, part 1 and 2. As you see, it has like 68,000 views. Go watch this video. It talks more in depth about this subject. I didn't even go all the way into this subject. I just showed you guys some of the recent stuff. But back in 2011, I uncovered a whole lot more that was going on, and people still thought I was off. It didn't matter how much evidence I brought and said, hey, check out the days of Noah. Look what's going on. This right here is going to lead up to something. But let me ask you something. Let me go back real quick. Actually, yeah, somatic parahumans. We look at all this stuff, right? Rethink the mark of the beast. What does the mark of the beast really mean? We talk about RFID chips. We talk about implants. We talk about barcodes. We've talked about all kinds of stuff. And when I say we, I mean collective as believers, Israelites that came out of Christianity, Christians, I'm including everybody. We talked about all this stuff. But what if the mark of the beast is something even more subtle and sinister than we think? What if it's tied into the days of Noah, the corruption of all flesh? And again, I'm not saying that's what the mark of the beast is. I'm just saying consider for a moment that the mark of the beast may be something deeper than we think it is. It may be literally marked with beast DNA. They have the ability to do it. And yet majority of churches are not focused on it. So how many human survivors were there? And this is why I mentioned that I don't agree with Pastor Omar on what he was teaching about a stowaway on the boat. I don't believe that for 1 second, because in 1 Peter 3:2, it talks about, let's go to 1 Peter 3, not 3:2, 1 Peter 3:18 through 20. And then I'll expound on it. Verse 18, for Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, and that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. The like figure whereunto even baptism doth now also save us, not the putting away from filth of the flesh, but the answer of a good conscience towards God by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So he's talking about the flood was figurative of the baptism, right? But we're not going to focus on that. And I mentioned that, the Bible says that the flood is figurative of baptism. It tells us that. But notice it says he went and preached to the spirits in prison, which were sometimes disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. He went and preached to the spirits in prison. Now, I find this interesting because there's going to be a scenario we're about to come upon in which a spirit or a bunch of spirits recognize him. Remember, when he died, he went and preached. So were the angels punished? We're going to come back to those spirits in a minute. So the angels were punished, and we're only going to read part of this. We're not going to read all this. Starting at verse 4. This is Enoch chapter 10, verse 4. Again, outside of the Bible, historical context, not scriptural context. And again, the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudael, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face, that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment, he shall be cast into the fire. So he gives this order to bind Azazel and some Yaza and the rest of the 200 angels that went down and had sex with these women. He says, bind him in these chains, put him in darkness until the day of judgment. This is from the Book of Enoch. Now, if we go to 2 Peter 2:4 through 5, 2:4 through 6, it says, for if God spared not the angels that sinned, what angels that sinned? But cast them down to hell and deliver them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Isn't that what we just read in Enoch? That these angels were bound in chains, put in darkness to be reserved to judgment? But Peter doesn't give any background on the angels that sinned that he's talking about. So a lot of Christian teachers, again, I keep referring to that because many of us came out of Christianity. A lot of Christian teachers would tell us that he's talking about the fallen angels that rebelled with Satan. And then they'll tell you at the end times that Satan and his 1/3 will come fight against Michael and his 2/3. How? How will they fight against him if they were already locked in chains and reserved unto judgment? How is this possible? It's contradictory because their doctrine isn't based on truth. It's based on avoiding a lot of the stranger stuff in Scripture. But notice what he says, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in a flood upon the world of the ungodly, and, conjunction again, and, notice there's 2 conjunctions. He mentioned the angels, and he said, and, which is a conjunction, joining Noah's time to the angels, and he's going to join Sodom and Gomorrah to this, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemn them in the overthrow, making them an example or an ensample unto those that after should live ungodly. They're going to be an example. Now, the angels are bound in chains of darkness. So 2 Peter is confirming exactly what Enoch chapter 10 said. So now let's go over to Jude chapter 1, verse 5 through 7. We're going to see similar wording from Peter and Jude. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall a matter be confirmed. I will therefore put you in remembrance of this, though you once knew this, how that the Lord, having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed them with a flood that believed not, and, conjunction again, the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation. What happened? Some Yahs in them said, hey, agree with me to go down and do this. They left their habitation. He hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness until the day of great judgment. So Jude is saying these angels are reserved in chains under darkness. Peter said they are in chains under darkness, reserved to judgment. Both of them agree with what Enoch was saying. And then what does he do? He links them to Sodom and Gomorrah, even as Sodom and Gomorrah. Didn't Peter link Noah's flood with Sodom and Gomorrah? And now we have Jude right here linking the angels to Sodom and Gomorrah. So even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh, are set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So now Jude says they're an example, right? But Jude gives a little bit more explanation. He says they went after strange flesh. This word right here is actually heteros. You can go look that up for yourself at BibleHub.com. Type in Jude 1:7, click interlinear, click the word strange. That word is heteros. So when people tell you, oh, Sodom and Gomorrah is about homosexuality, and Jude uses the word heteros flesh, they went after heteros, strange or different. If you're a heterosexual male, you like women. If you're a heterosexual female, you like men. So you like somebody of a different gender if you're hetero. So you have hetero flesh. Angels are not human. So in the days of Noah, angels went after human flesh. Celestial flesh went after human flesh. But what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah? Terrestrial or human flesh went after celestial flesh. They went after strange flesh. That's why they were destroyed as an example. They were trying to mix the flesh. That's what got them destroyed. Because remember, he said he would spare the cities if he found 10 righteous people. He didn't care about the homosexuality, the rape, the murder, all the other stuff that was going on. He said, if I find 10 righteous, I will spare them. As soon as he went in and they insisted on mixing flesh, they said, we want those angels or those men. I'm pretty sure that they knew they were angels. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But he says, we want those men. That's what they were saying. They were trying to break down the door. They were trying to grab the angels to mix flesh. And God said, no, we're not having this again. Done, and wiped it out. Now, what I think was going on is they may have been trying to get the angels to reproduce Nephilim. Why would they try to reproduce Nephilim? Because if you go to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 18 and 19, You won't catch this. But if you go back a few chapters, there's a war between 4 kings and 5 kings. And the first thing they do is they start to slaughter the Rapha. And the Rapha are tribes of Nephilim. We're going to cover that in part 2. The first thing they do before they go to war with Sodom and Gomorrah is slaughter the Nephilim, the hybrid allies of Sodom. And so when you get to chapter 18 and 19, you see that angels come into the city and they say, oh, look, we have a chance to renew our ranks. Possibly. We're going to come back to that. So let's talk about where they were cast. Peter says they were cast into hell, right? So 2 Peter 2:4, we have the word Tartarus. Again, we have a reference to Greek mythology in the Bible, Tartarus. Let me show you the number 5020. So you know I'm showing you the right thing. 5020, Tartarus. It says, I thrust down to Tartarus or Gehenna. But if you keep reading, right here in the Helps Word Studies, the place of punishment fit only for demons. They were sent to a special place. Later Tartarus came to represent eternal punishment of wicked people. And you get down right here, the Greek name for the underworld, especially the abode of the damned, hence to cast into hell, to send into the subterranean abyss reserved for demons and the dead. In Greek mythology, Tartarus was a place of punishment under the earth to which, for example, the Titans were sent. Remember, I mentioned the Titans earlier. The Titans were sent there. So this is consistent. Everything is consistent. The books outside of the Bible say that they were locked in chains of darkness. We come to 2 Peter and Jude, and it tells us they were locked in chains of darkness. Outside the Bible says they were locked there and reserved unto judgment. Peter and Jude say the same thing. Peter says they were cast into a special place meant for them. And if you continue to read, you will find out that Tartarus is a place of torment. It wasn't just hell as we think of it. It is a place of torment. So what happened to the Nephilim? Life after death, kinda. This is Enoch chapter 15. We're going to come down here to verse 8. It says, and now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh, this is important, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. What were they called? The gigantes, the earthborn. I mentioned that. They were born on the earth. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies because they are born from men and from holy watchers in their beginning and primal origin. So, right, they're a mixture. I hope we're on the same page. They're a mixture of mankind and watchers. And now they've become evil spirits, or AKA the demons. And they shall be evil spirits upon the earth, and the evil spirits shall be called. And evil spirits they shall be called. As for the spirits of heaven, in heaven shall be their dwelling. But as for the spirits of the earth, which were born upon the earth, the earthborn, the gigantes, on the earth shall be their dwelling. All this is consistent. The word gigantes is in the Greek Septuagint, the earthborn. And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless they hunger. So they're in torment and thirst and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them. So we see here that these giants, when they die, these hybrid giants, they become demons because they are mixed with angels and humans. Now you could say, okay, well, this is the book of Enoch and that has no spiritual reference and we don't have any proof of that, but we do. Once again, it's in the Bible because the doctrine is based in truth and it is consistent. And I'm going to show you in the Bible where the demons are specifically referred to as mixed spirits, wrongfully mixed spirits specifically. Think about that. What is the chances that happening? I don't believe in coincidence. So what's the chances that happening is that the Nephilim are mixed in the Old Testament. They're mixed with angels and human. And we're going to have Christ himself refer to the demons as wrongfully mixed spirits. So let's go to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to read, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read 5, 2 through, well, I guess I might as well read the whole thing, 2 through 9. And this is where they run into Legion, where they get off the boat in the Gadarenes. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and read that. Mark 5:2. And when he was come out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains. Why? Because they have supernatural strength, because they're possessed with the spirits of the Nephilim, which are demons. Because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs crying. Why was he crying? The demons are in torment. Remember, they hunger and they thirst and they can't eat or drink, and cutting himself with stones. But when he saw Jesus far off, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God?" How would he know who he is? Because when he died, he went down to preach. This hasn't happened yet, but when he died, he's going to go down to preach, meaning that they probably were already aware of who he was. Because remember, he's the Most High. He calls him Son of the Most High God. He knows who they are. He goes down there not to preach to them specifically. He preaches to the spirits that are in prison. And I'm pretty sure that these demons are aware, because they probably have the equivalent to demon internet or something like that, where they communicate with each other. They pass information. They aren't just running around solo and ignorant. And the reason he went to preach to these people is because, this is the reason I'm pointing this out, is because it tells you that you are still conscious. You are still able to understand after death. People aren't just mindlessly wandering around as spirits. Now, the reason I say this is because some people teach this, and in some belief systems, you basically become a like a shade. You're just blank and you wander around aimlessly. So anyway, these demons know who he is, because on the spiritual side, they have information. Hey, that's Christ. This information the humans don't have. So he's going to go down later and preach to other spirits in the prison after he dies. So he says, I cried with a loud voice, "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? I adjure thee by God that thou torment me not. Don't send me to Tartarus." Tartarus is a place of torment. Remember, they're supposed to get sent there into the day of judgment. So these beings don't want to be tormented by Christ. They know exactly who he is. It says, "For he said unto him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. And he asked him, What is thy name? And he answered, saying, My name is Legion, for we are many." What did we just read? That they're going to become spirits on the earth and torment mankind. So we see that the Nephilim don't have bodies anymore. Once they die, they don't go to heaven or hell like we do. They remain spirits on the earth, eternal. They have to possess a human body to order to eat, sleep, drink, and interact with mankind. And yet they still possess their spiritual knowledge of who Christ was, because he came from the spiritual realm. So there's knowledge floating around the spiritual realm. There's sentience in the spiritual realm, because again, he's going to go preach to them after he dies. He's going to go preach to the spirits in prison. So there's sentience, there's recognition. They recognized him as the Son of the Most High God. It didn't matter what skin he was in. They recognized him as soon as he got off of that boat. But let's continue. So now we're going to break down verse 8. Mark 5:8. We see here, he is called he says, "Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit." So akathartos, right here, 169, akathartos, unclean. Akathartos, one clean. Unclean, impure. He calls it an unclean, impure spirit. And people say, well, that's because it's a demon, and demons are evil, so they're impure and unclean because of sin. Okay. Well, let's look at this from the helps. Properly, not pure because mixed, i.e. adulterated with a wrong mix, and hence unclean. And then it says because tainted by sin. But notice it says a wrong mix. Is that coincidence that the Book of Enoch tells you that demons came from the Nephilim, which were mixed with angels and humans, and that wasn't supposed to happen? That was a wrong mix. Okay, so let's look at the antonym for that. Katharo, meaning clean, means free from wrong mixture. So was Christ using this word willy-nilly, or did he have intention? Was the writer of Mark using this word intentionally, or was this coincidence that he refers to these demons as unclean or wrongly mixed spirits? This seems very specific. Everything seems to line up without flaw. So let's put this in the end times context again. We looked at Isaiah 13, where he mentions Babylon, and we see Babylon mentioned again in the New Testament. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses shall a matter be confirmed. So we've already confirmed outside the Bible that the Nephilim are linked to the sons of God. So the sons of Seth theory is out the window. We've heard the pagan theory of the gods mixing with humans and creating the demigods or heroes. Everywhere we've seen hybrids. We've seen hybrids mentioned in the Bible. The Bible says satyrs will be in Babylon in the end times. I showed you how they're mixing different creatures right now in 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, all the way back to 2003. So now let's look at another piece of the Bible that gives us context. And after these things, I saw an angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was ignited or lighted with his glory. Now, I do want to point something out interesting. It starts with an angel coming down. Now, this angel isn't going to do what they did before, but it's interesting that it starts with an angel coming down, and then he's going to mention genetic mixing again. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen and has become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. That's from Revelation 18, 1 and 2, for those just listening. Now over here, you have this picture, which I think is interesting. This is supposed to be a Nordic type alien from the Ashtar Command, Lieutenant Ashtar. He's a blonde haired, blue eyed Nordic alien. Again, my personal belief is that the aliens are angels. We'll get into that later. But notice how he has the DNA strand coming out of his hand. We're going to talk more about this later. This is something that somebody said from an eyewitness. This is something somebody drew supposedly from an eyewitness account of their abduction, what they remembered from their abduction. So we'll come back to that stuff later. But we have evidence that stuff is coming from elsewhere, abducting people and messing with DNA. Once again, animal DNA and human DNA. But if you don't understand the days of Noah, you don't get that context in our time. You don't understand why ancient aliens is so popular right now. You don't understand why we're seeing all these hybrids if you don't do this type of study, which I know for a fact is not being done in most Christian churches. And I know for a fact is not being done in most camps. So Revelation 18:2, again, consistency. Revelation 18:2 tells us it's going to be hybrids in the end times, end time hybrids. Revelation 18:2. So Babylon the Great is fallen. And I'm going to show you some stuff that's a little bit is not translated. It says the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird, right? Now, it says it's become the habitation of demons. So we have this word right here. Habitation of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit. What's that? 169, akathartos. I pointed it out. Akathartos, 169, wrongly mixed spirit. So it's become the stronghold of demons and every wrongly mixed spirit and a prison for every wrongly mixed bird. That's 169 again. And a prison for every wrongly mixed creature. It doesn't translate the word creature in Revelation. Notice that birds, it does devils, demons, spirits, birds, but it does not translate the word creature. The book of Isaiah said that there would be satyrs. What is a satyr? A goat-human hybrid. The book of Revelation said there'd be wrongly mixed creatures, wrongly mixed birds, wrongly mixed spirits. So everything is consistent. We see that this hybrid theme isn't just about mythology. Even though some people would like us to believe that this stuff is mythology, this stuff is applicable today because the only places we see these types of hybrids are in the pages of mythology. But when we put them in context of the Bible, we see them now in modern times. And now we know that the connection tells us that we are living in the time or the time frame in which Christ will come back. This is in addition to the 400-year prophecy. This is in addition to Israel waking up. It also had to be like the days of Noah. All this stuff has to tie in together simultaneously. And as I've showed you, when you accept the supernatural explanation of the days of Noah, all of this stuff fits perfectly. If you are stuck on the sons of Seth, none of this stuff even matters. You're way off in prophecy anyway. Your prophecy foundation is wrong. Your prophecy clock is wrong if you don't understand what's going on in the days of Noah. So there is more, but we're not going to get to that until part 2. So let me show you what's coming up in this series. We're going to talk about Nimrod. Did he become a Nephilim or not? We're going to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah and the Rapha that they had for allies, the giants, the Nephilim that were their allies. We're going to talk about the giants in the promised land, how the giants escaped when Joshua and Caleb invaded and came to be in Gath, which leads to the David and Goliath encounter. We're going to talk about the lion-like men of Moab, which are different from the lions and they are different from men. They have a specific name. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about the hard evidence for the existence of giants. We're going to talk about all this stuff. So if you've not grabbed a copy of As the Days of Noah Were or Beyond Flesh and Blood, please do so. You can grab it in paperback and on Kindle through Amazon.com. If you want to support, go to patreon.com/Dante Fortson. If you want to support via Cash App, go to #BHITB. The PayPal support link is in the description. And for those of you in Super Chat, if you want to support, all you have to do is click the $. If you do not have it to support financially, a share and a prayer are always appreciated, but most definitely like this video. Thumbs up this video if you want to support. Thumbs up helps it rank higher in the search results when people are looking for information in videos. And the key is to get them solid information, not the nonsense that's being pushed out by everybody with a YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe. Again, make sure you thumbs up. If you don't want to miss anything coming up, make sure you click the notification bell and turn on all notifications. With that said, until next time, I'm out.